Leaving one's homeland for a distant country in pursuit of a better life is a dream shared by countless immigrants. But for today's main character, this wasn't the beginning of happiness. It was a true nightmare on American soil. She was brutally murdered by her own husband in broad daylight in New York City, stabbed to death with merciless blows. What drove a family to destruction, turning a husband into his wife's killer? Let's explore today's case with Crime Documentary Files. But before we begin, please like, share, and subscribe to support us. We're on our journey to 100,000 subscribers, and your support is our greatest motivation to keep going. On September 3rd, 2024, America's long Labor Day weekend had just ended. New York City returned to its usual frantic pace. But no one expected that on that afternoon, in the bustling Flushing neighborhood, a tragedy would unfold that would shock everyone who heard about it. Around 5:40 p.m., a young man with a tense expression and angry eyes hurried down the stairs leading to the basement of the building at 4139, located at the intersection of Casena Boulevard and Main Street. Below was the Supreme Guard Spa Center, a small massage parlor. Inside at that moment, besides several employees working, there were quite a few customers lying relaxed on massage tables. No one paid attention to the man who had just entered until he pulled out a sharp knife he had prepared. Before everyone's horrified eyes, the man lunged at a female employee working in the parlor, viciously attacking her, repeatedly stabbing her with fatal blows. The woman collapsed on the spot, blood pooling on the cold tile floor, deep wounds in her abdomen and neck turning the scene into chaotic and haunting horror. Screams, running footsteps, and desperate calls for help rang out in panic. Immediately after, the victim was rushed to New York Presbyterian Queens Hospital in critical condition. Doctors tried their best to save her, but by around 8 p.m. that same day, the woman was pronounced dead. As soon as they received the emergency call, New York police immediately dispatched more than 10 police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks to the scene, creating a chaotic and suffocatingly tense atmosphere. Sirens echoed throughout Flushing's narrow streets. Police quickly cordoned off the entire surrounding area, blocking both ends of the sidewalk, preventing passers-by and causing many curious residents to gather, crowding on the sidewalk, whispering and gossiping. According to reports from the scene, when police forces arrived, the perpetrator was still clutching the blood-stained knife in his hand, his face dazed as if he hadn't fully comprehended the crime he had just committed. Without a second's hesitation, police subdued and arrested him on the spot. The crime scene was a building housing many Chinese-owned stores, always bustling with customers. The massage parlor where the bloody incident occurred was located in the basement. To get there, one had to pass through a convenience store, an express shipping store, and a hair salon. All three store owners insisted to police that they had no idea what had happened below until they heard screams and alarm sirens. After the incident, the hair salon staff immediately changed their internal rules, no longer allowing any strangers to go down to the basement on their own. They emphasized that if anyone wanted to enter that area, they absolutely must be accompanied by police. Right after the incident occurred, information spreading through the community was extremely chaotic and contradictory. Initially, many people rumored it was a dispute between store owners. Shortly after, completely different information emerged suggesting the incident was a conflict between customers. In such a confused information environment, police investigation work became even more difficult. Investigators gradually brought witnesses back to police vehicles to take statements. Since most of the witnesses were of Asian descent with limited English proficiency, interpreters were mobilized to assist with interrogations. One by one, they were thoroughly questioned by investigators about what they had witnessed. The police cars deployed to maintain order and secure the crime scene only began leaving gradually in the evening. However, according to reports from journalists present at the scene, even when the clock struck around 9 p.m. that night, police remained to continue investigating and collecting evidence inside the parlor. Outside the store where the murder occurred, police continued strict surveillance, ensuring the scene remained undisturbed until the investigation was complete. Immediately after being arrested, the suspect had to undergo an interrogation lasting many hours with investigators. This tense interrogation only ended around 4 a.m. on September 4th, nearly 11 hours after the crime occurred. Immediately afterward, the suspect was officially transferred to the Queens Central Detention Center to await further legal proceedings. After completing the initial investigation steps, police released identifying information for both the suspect and the victim. The male suspect was identified as Ma Jiahai, a 25-year-old from Guizhou Province, China. The victim in this case was Tang Guimei, 26 years old, also from Guizhou Province, China. Police confirmed that Ma Jiahai and Tang Guimei were not strangers, but husband and wife. Both were registered at the same address in Flushing, an apartment in the building at 14-20 Cherry Avenue, Queens. This residence was only a few blocks from the murder scene, a distance that could be walked in just a few minutes. However, when contacted to verify information, the building manager stated that neither the suspects nor the victims' names appeared on the official resident list registered with management. Nevertheless, the manager confirmed that the couple was actually living and renting in the building, possibly under someone else's name or subletting from the primary tenant. On the morning of September 4th, just one day after the shocking incident in Flushing, reporters contacted the New York police to learn more about the investigation's progress. At this time, the head of New York's 109th Precinct spoke out to announce the preliminary investigation results. He stated that this heartbreaking incident was not a random attack, but essentially a severe case of domestic violence leading to murder. According to records collected by police, the male suspect had a history of assaulting his wife while still in China. The physical and psychological wounds the woman had to endure lasted for many years. And this time, the final tragedy occurred on foreign soil. The precinct commander also shared in a troubled tone. This is a case that reminds all community residents that, when it comes to domestic violence, silence is never acceptable, nor can it be tolerated. He further warned that domestic violence is typically repetitive in nature. Once it occurs, if not intervened in time, it becomes a vicious cycle leading to irreversible consequences. He hoped that anyone who is a victim of abuse, whether physical or psychological, should immediately report to police or seek professional support organizations for help. Only in this way can we prevent heartbreaking tragedies like this from happening again. According to statistics he provided, in America, nearly 50% of homicides are directly related to domestic violence. With domestic violence, there are only two numbers, either 0 times or countless times. According to an acquaintance of the victim, this young couple had only arrived in America just over a month ago. They didn't come through legal channels like many others, but chose the perilous path of illegal border crossing, traversing the border, traveling overland from China to the U.S. However, that journey hadn't yet brought light before darkness enveloped their lives. Upon entering the country, both were discovered and detained by U.S. Border Patrol. During interrogation, the wife was determined to be pregnant, so she was immediately released. The husband, the suspect in this case, was detained and monitored by immigration authorities for a short time, awaiting verification and processing. After more than a week, he was released and hurried to Flushing to reunite with his wife. Additionally, this person revealed that after being released by immigration authorities, during the time her husband was still being monitored, Tang Guimei had to go alone to undergo an abortion procedure, terminating the pregnancy. This was a heavy decision she had to face in the circumstances of newly arriving in a foreign land without sufficient economic means. After undergoing the abortion, Tang Guimei only rested for a short time. Immediately after, economic pressure and the need to earn money forced her to quickly seek direction for herself. She chose to learn acupressure massage. However, she had only been learning for 2 or 3 days, hadn't even gotten familiar with the work yet when disaster struck. However, conflicting information exists around the timing of Ma Jiahai's release. Some other rumors claim he wasn't monitored by immigration authorities for that long. According to this version, he had actually been released by immigration much earlier, but was then suspected of theft, which is why he was arrested by police again. This is why there was information suggesting he had only been released just 1 week before this shocking incident occurred. Regarding the cause leading to this heartbreaking case, many sources indicate that everything began with simmering conflicts in the young couple's marriage. After arriving in America, their life was far from easy. They had to worry about making a living while shouldering enormous debt from the border-crossing journey. Between financial pressure and emotional rifts, the relationship between Ma Jiahai and Tang Guimei gradually became tense. Ma Jiahai appeared angry and dissatisfied because his wife had an abortion not long before, believing she had betrayed his desire to become a father. Other sources said he was unhappy with Tang Guimei's work at the massage parlor. Additionally, there were rumors that Ma Jiahai had discovered WeChat messages on his wife's phone between her and another man, with flirtatious, intimate content. Blind rage erupted. In a moment of losing control, Ma Jiahai rushed out of the house, heading to the massage parlor where Tang Guimei was working. He brought a sharp knife and, in his impulsive fury, stabbed his wife multiple times in the neck and body before the horrified eyes of employees and customers present in the parlor. After the shocking murder occurred, many rumors began spreading through the Chinese community in Flushing. Some said there were ambiguous relationships between the victim and some customers at the massage parlor, stirring up considerable gossip. Faced with this misleading and baseless information, the victim's older sister could no longer remain silent. Besides contacting the Guizhou Fellow Townsmen Association in America for help, she also proactively appeared in media outlets, accepting interviews to tell the true story about her sister Tang Guimei's life and her husband Ma Jiahai. She recounted that Tang Guimei and Ma Jiahai met in 2016 when both were young people from a poor rural area in Guizhou Province, China. After getting to know each other, they came together through sincere love, then married not long after. In 2018, their first daughter was born, bringing simple happiness to their small home. By 2020, their second daughter was also born. However, these two children, now still living in China, lost their mother when they were still very young. The sister recounted that her brother-in-law's family's economic situation had always been very difficult and impoverished. Daily survival weighed heavily on this young couple's shoulders. To have enough money to cover living expenses and raise their two daughters, both Guimei and Jiahai had to work away from home long-term, doing hired work in different places. They sacrificed time with their children, sacrificed their youth, all for a fragile hope of a better future. Normally, if two people could overcome difficulties together, working hard and supporting each other, then sooner or later, the family's economy would improve and become more stable. However, the harsh truth was that this was just a distant dream. Unlike other working families who could overcome hardships together, this couple's relationship gradually went down a tragic dead end. Instead of becoming a solid support for his wife, Jiahai began showing alarming violent tendencies. From the first times, Guimei had repeatedly endured physical abuse from her own husband. What was worse was that after each act of violence, Jiahai would appear remorseful, crying and apologizing, promising to change and never repeat his actions. Those apologies had softened his wife's heart many times, making her believe he would change. But time proved those promises were just empty words. Instead of gradually diminishing, the domestic violence became increasingly severe and cruel over time. The level of violence escalated beyond imagination. He had even once used the back of a knife blade to strike directly at his wife's scalp, causing painful wounds and leaving trauma both physical and psychological. Faced with such brutal behavior, many would wonder why Guimei didn't leave this husband sooner. The answer lies in the psychology of many women in similar circumstances, because of the children. To give her two young daughters a complete family, Guimei had repeatedly chosen to forgive her husband, enduring to the point of tormenting herself. But the tragedy was that this bottomless forgiveness not only didn't solve the problem, but inadvertently empowered the perpetrator of violence. Jiahai's violent tendencies became increasingly worse day by day. The sister also pointed out a particularly serious detail showing Jiahai's level of cruelty. Even when Guimei was pregnant with their younger daughter, the couple still had fierce arguments. And during that incident, Jiahai showed no mercy and struck his pregnant wife extremely hard. As a result, Guimei suffered severe hemorrhaging, and ultimately the baby had to be born prematurely under dangerous circumstances. This wasn't just simple domestic violence, but behavior that directly threatened the lives of both people. Guimei's sister continued recounting that over the years, no matter how much her sister tried to endure, tried to maintain family happiness, there were ultimately times when she couldn't bear it anymore and had to seek legal intervention. Specifically, Guimei had to call the police twice, seeking help from authorities. The first time occurred in January 2023. That was the first time Guimei overcame her fear, overcame the shame and worry about family disgrace to pick up the phone and call police for help. However, unfortunately, that intervention seemed insufficient to stop Jiahai from continuing his path of violence. After police left, family life continued with endless cycles of abuse. By April 2024, just months before the final tragedy, the two had another serious conflict, this time even more violent than previous ones. With no other option, Guimei once again had to call police, hoping to find protection for herself. In this fierce argument, not only her head but also Guimei's face suffered serious injuries. The physical pain combined with psychological despair pushed her to the brink of complete collapse. According to the sister, if it hadn't been at that exact moment that their younger daughter was beside her crying miserably, using her small hands to hold on and plead with her mother, then Guimei, in that state of utter desperation, might even have intended to end it all, to end her pain-filled life right there. After this serious family incident, under police witness and requirement, Jiahai had to write a commitment letter right at the police station. In it, he promised he would never lay hands on his wife again, would control his anger and behave like a proper husband and father. But in the end, reality once again proved that promises on paper, commitments written under police pressure, were all just worthless, empty words. That commitment letter couldn't prevent the final bloody tragedy from occurring. The sister also revealed that to realize their American dream, Guimei and Jiahai had to borrow an enormous debt of up to 500,000 yuan, approximately 70,000 US dollars. This was an astronomical figure for an ordinary working family from rural areas. This debt was like a huge boulder weighing on their shoulders, making every subsequent decision revolve around how to earn enough money to repay it. Precisely because of this tremendous financial pressure, after arriving in America, the two basically had no ability, either economically or psychologically, to raise the child in the mother's womb. Moreover, having an additional newborn would prevent Guimei from working to earn money, while the debt kept counting each day with increasingly rising interest. They could only focus on earning money to pay off that crushing debt. Faced with this brutal reality, Guimei had no choice but to have an abortion. After undergoing the abortion procedure, Guimei only rested and recuperated for about 10 days. Immediately after, she had to start looking for work to have income. However, she was severely limited by the language barrier, making communication and job hunting extremely difficult. Additionally, she had no professionally recognized skills in America, no degrees, no work experience suitable for the labor market here. After considering options, Guimei decided to go to the Supreme Guard Spa, the place that would later become the scene of the bloody tragedy, to learn acupressure massage. To have the opportunity to learn this trade, she had to pay $200 in tuition fees. The sister continued emphasizing in a firm and emotional tone that her sister, Guimei, at the time the tragedy occurred, was completely only in the learning phase. She hadn't officially started working, hadn't begun serving customers, didn't have any clients at all, whether male or female. She had only been learning for 2 or 3 days, was still in the process of familiarizing herself with basic massage techniques, didn't yet have sufficient skill to serve customers. The sister particularly wanted to clarify this to completely refute the toxic rumors spreading in the community, rumors insinuating that Guimei had inappropriate relationships with male customers or provided unhealthy services at the massage parlor. These rumors were not only baseless, but also extremely insulting to the honor of the deceased, causing the family immense grief. The sister emphasized that there was absolutely no serving male customers or any improper behavior as rumored. Therefore, the sister affirmed that this horrific murder case absolutely didn't occur for the reasons spread by rumors, not because Jiahai was unhappy about his wife's abortion, nor because he suspected his wife of improper behavior at the massage parlor. All those explanations were distortions of the truth. As for the real reason, the direct cause that led to the tragedy, the sister had the opportunity to learn it from the perpetrator's own mouth. Specifically, 3 days after Jiahai was arrested on September 6, 2024, he was allowed to make a phone call from the detention center, and he called Guimei's sister. In that tense and painful phone call, when the sister used a trembling voice mixed with anger to question her brother-in-law, "Why did you do this? How could you be so cruel?" According to his account on September 3rd, the very day the tragedy occurred, he and Guimei had an argument over the phone. The cause of the argument? Just some trivial matters. Small, petty things so minor that even he himself couldn't remember specifically what they argued about. Not about money, not about infidelity, not about any deep conflict, but simply trivial disputes that any couple might encounter in daily life. In that argument, Jiahai felt his wife's words were harsh. In his unstable emotional state, Jiahai didn't just simply get angry, but quickly escalated to developing murderous intent, an extreme and unforgivable decision. What was frightening was that he didn't just have the thought and leave it at that, but acted in a planned and determined manner. He first proactively ran to a nearby store and bought a knife. Then, with the knife in hand and rage flooding his mind, he ran straight to the massage parlor, where he knew his wife was learning the trade. And right there, in front of many people, he didn't hesitate to swing the knife and stab his young wife multiple times in succession, cruelly taking her life. The sister recounted with a bitter voice, "My brother-in-law told me that even now, even while sitting in the prison cell, even having had time to reflect on his actions, Jiahai himself cannot understand, doesn't know why he had to do that." After publicly disclosing all this information fully and transparently, the victim's sister expressed her two greatest wishes from the bottom of her heart. First, she earnestly hoped that the community would stop spreading misleading information, baseless rumors that damaged the honor of the deceased. Second, and most importantly, Guimei's sister also hoped that this painful story would become a warning, an alarm bell for all women who are victims of domestic violence. She called on them not to choose the path of unlimited forgiveness as her sister had done. Don't think that your endurance and sacrifice will reform the abuser. Domestic violence never disappears on its own, but only escalates if not decisively stopped. Meanwhile, from a completely different angle of the story, the suspect, Jiahai's younger brother, was also in a state of desperation and helplessness. He had proactively sought out the Guizhou Fellow Townsmen Association to ask for help. Unlike the victim's sister who was seeking justice and truth, the suspect's brother was hoping to find some ray of hope for his criminal brother. He earnestly hoped the association could play the role of bridge, conveying information and his message to his detained brother, or at least to Jiahai's lawyer, wanting him to look at the reality that back home there were still 2 young daughters waiting. For the children's sake, he should try to reform himself, try to live better, live more responsibly in prison, and hope that one day he might receive a reduced sentence and have a chance to see his children again. The president of the Guizhou Fellow Townsmen Association in America stated that the association's board of directors was assisting with handling Tang Guimei's funeral arrangements. Because Tang Guimei's family was so impoverished, they desperately needed help. He was preparing to launch a community fundraising campaign to help the 2 innocent young children still in Guizhou overcome their difficulties. Besides this case, there's another case where the main character was also a female massage worker in Flushing, New York. Zhou Yue, a 42-year-old Chinese massage worker, had lived on foreign soil for many years. In those early days of illegal immigration to America, she lived quietly, lonely, and precariously in a strange world, without relatives, without friends, and without the skills or conditions to find stable, decent work. In desperation, a fellow townsman friend introduced her to work at a spa center in Ohio. From then on, Zhou Yue became attached to the massage profession that helped her sustain her life on foreign soil. Then in 2019, Zhou Yue's dull life suddenly turned in a different direction. A middle-aged married man with an elegant and courteous demeanor unexpectedly entered her life. The 2 couldn't control their emotions and gradually developed feelings. The man spent lavishly, took her traveling everywhere, making Zhou Yue, who had lived alone for years, feel the warmth she had lost long ago. By his side, she felt alive again, with someone to listen, someone who cared, someone who made her feel she was still loved. However, behind that sweet relationship was an ironic truth. The man had a wife and child. Jo Yue knew this clearly, but the more she tried to let go, the more she couldn't break free. She had invested all her genuine feelings into that wrong relationship, then became immersed in illusion that one day, the man would divorce, marry her, and they would build a new family together, have children, live happily like ordinary people. However, when Jo Yue was immersed in that relationship, the man told her a truth that shattered her heart. He admitted that between him and his ex-wife there were no longer any feelings. The marriage was just an empty shell. However, he couldn't leave his daughter. Hearing those words, Jo Yue couldn't blame him, couldn't force him. She could only accept the fate of being a mistress in the shadows, continuing to maintain this secretive but conflicted relationship. Day after day, Jo Yue still worked at the small massage parlor in Ohio, living a dull, monotonous life. But failure in love, combined with repetitive manual labor work, gradually made her lose faith in herself. Increasingly, more male customers came to the spa. Initially, Jo Yue only saw them as strangers. But then, for money, for loneliness, for emptiness, she was half pushed, half willing, gradually stepping into the dark side of the profession, doing things involving physical services. However, everything going wrong in life made her increasingly dissatisfied and angry. She blamed all her mistakes on her lover's daughter, believing that the girl had destroyed the happiness she deserved to have. In rage and jealousy, Jo Yue began calling the man's home, cursing his ex-wife and daughter, venting all her suppressed frustrations. And then, a dark thought began sprouting in her mind. If that mother and daughter no longer existed, perhaps she would have her man. Since embarking on the path of serving customers, Jo Yue's psychology became increasingly distorted, hatred gradually consuming reason. When the man's feelings began to cool, Jo Yue became even more convinced that the cause was his wife and daughter. Therefore, she hired a hitman and sent threatening messages, but none succeeded. She was discovered before the crime could occur. Currently, Jo Yue is detained in prison. These two stories, one about the young wife Tang Guimei who died at the hands of her abusive husband, and one about the lonely woman Jo Yue who destroyed her life in hatred and jealousy, seem unrelated but reflect the same tragedy, the desperation of people in a foreign land. Tang Guimei and Ma Jiahai once crossed mountains and forests with faith in a better future, but the light of the American dream quickly faded before the darkness of poverty, debt, and violence. And Jo Yue, a 42-year-old woman on foreign soil, because of her craving for love and persistent loneliness, lost her reason and turned herself into a criminal. In a harsh life of survival, perhaps the most precious thing each of us needs to preserve is calmness and kindness. Because in just 1 minute of losing control, all dreams, whether dreams of changing one's life or dreams of love, can turn into nightmares. And that's today's case. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.